Greetings and welcome back. In this video, we'll be taking a brief look at a very interesting shrimp that has been given several different names. It's sometimes known as a bamboo shrimp, a wood shrimp, a fan shrimp, a filter feeding shrimp, or my personal favorite, the Singapore flower shrimp. Regardless of what you decide to call them, these shrimp have a mind of their own, and this one likes to be called Sharon. Sharon's claws have been specially modified with long hairs designed to trap tiny bits of organic matter as it passes by in the current. The claws are then periodically withdrawn and brought to the mouth where the little bits of food trapped in the hairs are ingested by the shrimp. This feeding style is only effective in aquariums where there's a substantial current that carries with it an abundance of suspended organic matter on which the shrimp can feed. At the moment, she's eating microworms, but bamboo shrimp can also eat anything that's been crushed into a fine powder, such as algae wafers, pellets, or flake food. However, these shrimp are versatile, and if they need to, they can feed from the substrate using the fans on their legs like brooms to sweep up small pieces of food. But this method of feeding is far from ideal. And if you see your flower shrimp feeding from the bottom of the tank like this, then it's a possible sign that they're not getting enough food moving around in the water. And a hungry bamboo shrimp will not hesitate to crawl right out of the tank if the conditions are not to their liking. So it's very important that the tank has a tight-fitting lid to prevent a hungry shrimp from trying to escape. Or, better yet, keep them happy so they won't try so hard to leave. Aquariums with super efficient filtration systems that are designed to keep the water crystal clear will eventually cause these filter feeding shrimp to starve from lack of food. Filter floss and water polishing pads remove too many suspended particles from the water column and make it harder for these shrimp to find enough food. Ideally, bamboo shrimp should be housed in a mature planted tank containing 20 or more gallons of water, because the more water you have, the more food that it can potentially hold, and larger tanks tend to have more stable water parameters, which the shrimp will most certainly appreciate. Lots of live aquatic plants and decaying driftwood will increase the amount of organic matter in the tank by creating a more complex environment where all sorts of microorganisms can live and reproduce. These tiny life forms then provide a naturally occurring food source for your shrimp right in the tank, and the more organic matter you have suspended in the water column, the less supplemental feeding you'll need to do. Yes, there is such a thing as an aquarium that's too clean. And if you think your wood shrimp needs some extra food, then as I mentioned earlier, algae wafers, fish flakes, or pellets crushed up into a fine powder can be added to the tank. Another alternative is to use a specially formulated fry food such as First Bites by Hikari, but it's important to remember that finely powdered foods are easy to overfeed because a little goes a long way, so it's best to use these foods sparingly. I like to mix the powder with some water in a small bowl and then use a little pipette to deliver the food right near where the shrimp is feeding. Unfortunately, this bamboo shrimp is not the only filter feeder in this tank, because all of this organic matter suspended in the water column not only feeds the filter shrimp, but it also feeds some very tiny filter feeders known as vorticellas. Vorticella are so small that they're very hard to see until there's a lot of them, and I had no idea that this shrimp had vorticella on it until I looked at this footage. Infected shrimp can be treated individually using a salt water bath, which consists of 1 tablespoon of aquarium-safe salt per cup of aquarium water. The infected shrimp should be placed in the salt water bath for 2 to 3 minutes. After treatment, the shrimp is then removed from the bath and placed back in fresh water of the same temperature. Unfortunately, the salt bath does not kill the vorticella living in the main tank, and they will most certainly reinfect the shrimp. So, after the bath, it's best to put the treated shrimp in a small hospital tank and let it recover from what must have been a fairly traumatic experience. The difficulty with killing the vorticella is that they feed on bacteria and other tiny organisms that are suspended in the water column. So a thorough cleaning of the substrate and all of the stuff floating around in the water may be necessary to keep their numbers low and relatively harmless. The obvious flaw with this clean tank approach to fighting the vorticella is that cleaning up the tank too much can also mean less food for the filter-feeding shrimp. And it's important to note that all bamboo shrimp as well as all Amano shrimp are wild-caught in Southeast Asia, and the majority of them are infected with vorticella. So it's best to quarantine and treat any wild-caught shrimp before placing them in your tank. In the wild, vorticella don't usually kill shrimp because infestations are mild, but due to the stresses of capture, transport, and relocation, these tiny parasites can quickly become deadly. And with this in mind, it's now time for my friend Sharon the shrimp to take a nice warm bath.